Good morning. Okay, y'all have got to do better than that. I know it is 8 o'clock in the morning. I haven't had coffee. You all have cups of. Good morning. All right, all right. That's more like it. Now, I was told that this was a different type of talk, that this was more of a conversation of sorts. So, if I may, I want to be frank with you. I mean, my mom always said, if you speak with your heart, you can never go wrong. And so today, I'm going to do exactly that. Folks, this work that we do, it's not easy. It's really, really hard. And I don't mean difficult in the way that you may be thinking. It's not hard because of the constant search for that grant gold that you hope you will fund, that will fund and sustain your research. It's not difficult because of the publish and perish grind. And it's not hard because of the challenge of being a community-based researcher whose job entails translating the wants and needs of the community to the world of research and translating the world of research to the community. The work is hard because of the way that I feel about it. It's the fact that from the top of my head to the tips of my toes, from my fingertips to my core, I know that I was called to do this work. In fact, I can tell you the exact moment that it happened, the exact moment that I knew the path that lay before me. It was when I met Edna. I was living in Boston at the time, working side by side with families who were surviving the homicide of a loved one. I was working with them for the purpose of developing violence prevention programs. And Edna's son had just been murdered. A bunch of us who worked with Edna attended the funeral to pay our respects. I entered the church, and as I approached Edna, I extended my hand and said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Edna looked at me with disdain, and she said, "I didn't lose my son. He was taken from me." Her words struck me. They struck me to my very core. And it was in that moment, that very moment, that I just knew I was called to do this work. In that moment, two things became abundantly clear. If I, as a trained social worker, even with the best of intentions, didn't know how to comfort her or support her, how equipped were other service providers? And how would Edna cope with the murder of her son? Unfortunately, Edna is one of many African Americans struggling to survive the homicide of a loved one. African Americans experience homicide violence at higher rates than any other racial group in the United States. African American males between the ages of 15 to 44 represent the majority of homicide victims. And research suggests that for each homicide victim, 7 to 10 family members are left behind, struggling to cope with the murder of their loved one. It's been 16 years since I first met Edna. I would later see Edna at the funeral of her second youngest son, who had also been murdered. I never got the opportunity to tell her that her personal, painful, and yet powerful declaration moved me. It fueled my hunger and my passion to answer the call to serve African American survivors of homicide victims by developing culturally relevant research and programs with and for them. I never got a chance to tell her that since that time, I was able to develop a model of coping for African American survivors of homicide victims, and that model inform the development of an intervention, and that model inform the development of a tool of measurement that can be used to assist clinicians and other service providers in their efforts to support African American survivors in coping with their grief. If our paths were to cross today, I would tell her that despite the seemingly endless number of homicides that have occurred since we last met, despite the number of African Americans murdered at the hands of police, and the countless family members and friends left behind struggling to make sense out of that which is senseless, I will always, always answer the call. The work that remains I see vividly in my dreams. They are nightmares for some whose dreams have been shattered by the epidemic of homicide violence in their communities, and the ripple effect of grief that ensues that affects all aspects of a survivor's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. They're very real. But I will answer the call by dreaming for them. I dream a world where homicide violence in marginalized and disenfranchised communities of color is the exception and not the rule. I dream a world where I leave behind a legacy of research that can help survivors of homicide victims navigate their way through the unthinkable. I dream a world where drive-bys aren't the lullabies of precious youth unable to envision their next birthday. I dream a world where, in the days, weeks, months, and years that lie ahead of us, as we continue to be challenged in our efforts to uphold our ethical principles that reflect our profession's core values, that we, individually and collectively, through our research, the development of policy, our teaching and practice, that we will answer the call. I dream a world where we answer the call by not forgetting Edna, and also not forgetting the Eric Gardners, the Trayvon Martins, the Sandra Blands, the Michael Browns, the Freddie Grays, and the countless Black homicide victims who appear daily in the back pages of our newspapers. I dream a world where, in honor of their memory, we allow them to dream bigger than we could have ever imagined. Thank you.